and welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So today's Deep Dive, we're tackling a big one, a topic I know is really, really important to basically everyone listening. If you're learning English, fluency.
Ah, yes. The F word of language learning.
Exactly. And look, you, our fantastic listeners, have shared a whole bunch of resources with us. We've got everything from, experienced English teachers on YouTube giving their best tips.
Some really practical stuff in there.
To some pretty insightful articles digging into like grammar fundamentals, but also the mindset you need.
That mindset piece is crucial. We'll definitely get into that.
And even some really relatable personal stories from other learners, which I always find useful.
Yeah, hearing from people on the same journey makes a difference.
So our mission today, basically, is to sift through all this great material, pull out the insights that really stand out, the stuff that actually works, and give you a clear, actionable path forward. We don't want you feeling overwhelmed, just clear steps.
Kind of like a roadmap distilled from all these different perspectives.
Exactly. So let's dive in. Let's unpack this and see what the real keys are to unlocking English fluency for you.
Sounds good. And what's fascinating is you start looking across all these sources, the videos, the articles, the personal accounts, is how certain core ideas just keep bubbling up, don't they?
Yeah, you really do see patterns emerging.
Definitely. There's a really strong emphasis not just on like what techniques you use, the specific exercises and things, but also, just as importantly, on the critical role your mindset plays. Your attitude towards learning.
Right, that growth mindset idea we'll touch on later.
Exactly. And also the importance of staying actively involved. Not just passively soaking up information like a sponge.
It's not like reading a textbook and hoping it sticks.
Precisely. It's about you, the learner, becoming an active participant. You're creating your own learning journey, essentially.
So our goal here is to take all these individual pieces of advice, this tip from a teacher, that strategy from an article, and weave them together.
Yeah, into a sort of cohesive understanding. Something that makes sense as a whole picture of what actually contributes to that feeling of fluency you're aiming for.
Okay, so to really get started on unpacking this, maybe the best place to begin is, what do we actually mean by fluency?
Good starting point. Because it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think different people listening probably have slightly different ideas in their head about what fluency looks like or maybe feels like.
And several of your sources directly address this. The general vibe seems to be, look, it's not about reaching some kind of mythical, perfect, error-free state.
Right. It's not about sounding exactly like a native speaker from day one or maybe ever.
Exactly. It's much more about the ability to speak with a certain ease, confidence,
Promptly actually put it quite well, didn't they? Something about speaking comfortably, almost like it's second nature.
Yes, that was a good, simple definition. Speaking with ease and confidence, that feels achievable, doesn't it?
It does. It feels less intimidating than perfection.
And Carrie Lilly, writing for Reply as well, she adds another really crucial layer to that.
Okay.
She points out that, ultimately, the main goal should probably be becoming a more effective communicator.
Ah, okay. So focusing on the outcome.
Right. I mean, yes, having accurate grammar and a good vocabulary, those are definitely helpful tools, no question.
Yes, they help you build the message.
But the main focus, she argues, should lean towards, can you successfully get your message across? Can people understand your thoughts, your ideas?
That makes a lot of sense. It shifts the focus from internal perfection to external connection.
Precisely. Are you understood? That's the core.
Absolutely. And I know from my own, struggles learning other languages and hearing from so many learners, that idea of reaching flawless, native-like fluency can sometimes feel like this incredibly high bar, maybe even unrealistic.
Yeah, it can feel daunting.
And Preply, in the resources, they actually acknowledge that feeling. And I think it's so important for everyone listening right now to hear this. Significant progress, real improvement, is absolutely within your reach.
Yes, crucially so.
Even if that ultimate, maybe slightly fuzzy goal of perfect fluency feels a long, long way off today.
It's about the journey, not just the destination. You mentioned learning an instrument. It's a bit like that, isn't it?
How so?
Well, you aim for mastery, of course. You want to play beautifully. But along the way, you absolutely have to celebrate each small improvement. Learning a new chord, playing a scale smoothly.
Right, you notice and appreciate the progress you're making week by week.
Exactly. Keeps you motivated. Same with language. Celebrate being able to order coffee, understand a joke, follow a conversation. Those are big wins.
That's a fantastic analogy, and it really highlights a key distinction, I think, that came up, the difference between fluency and accuracy.
Yes, they're related, but definitely not the same thing.
How would you explain the difference?
Well, you could, theoretically, have a really strong grasp of English grammar. You know all the rules, you have a wide vocabulary, you can construct perfectly correct sentences on paper.
Okay, so high accuracy.
Very high accuracy, but if, when you actually try to speak, you hesitate constantly, you're searching for every other word, you speak very slowly. Your speech wouldn't feel fluent to a listener, even if it's technically correct.
Right, the delivery isn't smooth, it doesn't flow.
Exactly. So that focus on effective communication helps us prioritize getting your thoughts out, sharing your ideas, even if there are occasional minor errors along the way.
And those errors, they're just part of learning, aren't they?
Absolutely. They're not failures, they're data points showing you where you need a bit more practice or understanding. Everyone makes them.
Okay, so if we're aiming for this feeling of communicative ease, this ability to express ourselves effectively, where do we actually start? How do we build that foundation?
Well, one technique that kept popping up surprisingly early and maybe counterintuitively for some is listening.
Listening as a fluency technique, not just for understanding.
Exactly. Teacher Tiffany on YouTube, for example, she dedicates a significant chunk of her advice specifically to why listening is a truly fundamental technique for building fluency.
Interesting. Tell me more about her reasoning. Why listening first?
What I found really insightful in her explanation was the why behind it. She makes a really strong case that listening is crucial because it massively improves your understanding of spoken English in general.
Okay, comprehension makes sense.
But it goes way beyond just understanding individual words. It's about picking up on different accents, recognizing colloquial phrases, grasping the natural flow, the rhythm, the melody of the language.
The musicality of it almost.
Precisely. And she uses that really compelling analogy you mentioned earlier, the baby learning to speak.
Right, they just listen for months.
Exactly. For months and months, their primary activity is just absorbing the sounds around them, listening intently before they even try to utter their first proper word.
So that foundational listening period,
right,
that's what builds the necessary understanding. The sort of internal map of the language's sounds and patterns.
That's the idea. Your brain is soaking it all in, figuring out the sound system, the intonation contours, how words connect, all passively, just through exposure.
That makes so much sense when you put it like that. It's like building the database before you try to run queries on it.
A good way to put it. And Tiffany also makes another really important point about how listening naturally expands your vocabulary. And this, I think, is a crucial distinction that often gets missed.
How so? Compared to, say, learning word lists.
Exactly. She contrasts listening-based vocabulary acquisition with the more traditional approach of learning words solely from textbooks or lists.
Right, which can sometimes feel a bit dry, or maybe outdated.
That's her point. You might end up memorizing words or phrases that honestly aren't really in common use anymore in everyday natural conversations.
Okay, so listening gives you the current vocabulary.
Precisely. When you immerse yourself in listening to native speakers in real-life context, whether that's, watching movies, binge-watching TV series you enjoy, listening to podcasts on topics you actually find interesting, you're constantly being exposed to the vocabulary, the idioms, the phrasal verbs that people are actually using right now.
So it's learning words in their natural habitat, so to speak.
Exactly. This kind of contextual learning is just so much more valuable than memorizing isolated words off a list. You start to understand not just the dictionary definition, but how the word is actually used in spoken communication, the nuances, the connotations, the situations where it fits naturally.
And it probably sticks better too, right?
Yeah.
Because it's linked to a scene or a character or an idea you were engaged with.
Absolutely. Memory is often tied to emotion and context. And it's not just vocabulary and comprehension either. Tiffany also shared that really interesting personal story about learning Korean.
Oh yeah, tell us about that. How did listening impact her speaking?
Well, she mentioned how people were often genuinely surprised when she spoke Korean, sometimes even mistaking her for a native speaker, or at least someone who had lived there for a very long time.
Wow, that's impressive.
And she attributed a huge part of that success specifically to her dedicated, focused practice of listening to Korean, hours and hours of it.
So it directly impacted her pronunciation and intonation.
massively, according to her. It really underscores the power of imitation that comes from consistent, attentive listening. By hearing the correct sounds, the natural melody, the stress patterns over and over again.
You start to internalize them unconsciously.
That's the idea. Your brain absorbs the patterns, your mouth and ears start to get tuned in. It's like learning the rhythm of a dance by watching expert dancers move. You start to feel the beat internally.
So by constantly listening to native speakers, you're almost subconsciously absorbing the right pronunciation for sounds, where the stress falls in words, the rise and fall of intonation in questions versus statements.
Exactly. All those subtle musical elements of speech.
And this auditory input helps your brain and your mouths kind of coordinate.
Yeah.
So when you do speak, you can imitate those patterns more accurately.
Precisely. It leads to clearer, much more natural-sounding English, or whichever language you're learning. Less hesitation about how something should sound.
Okay, this is really compelling. Listening is the absolute bedrock. But you can't just listen forever, right? To actually cross that bridge to being fluent, you have to, well, speak.
Exactly. Listening lays the foundation, but you have to build the house. We need to move beyond just passively absorbing the language and actively start producing it ourselves.
And that brings us, perhaps not surprisingly, to the absolute vital necessity of speaking practice, which was, of course, another key technique highlighted everywhere.
Unsurprisingly, yes. Teacher Tiffany emphasizes this. The handbooks emphasize this. You simply cannot become a fluent speaker of English without actually, speaking English.
It sounds almost ridiculously obvious when you say it like that.
It does. But it's remarkable how many learners, maybe out of fear, maybe habit, tend to focus the vast majority of their efforts on studying grammar rules, memorizing vocabulary lists.
And kind of avoid the speaking part?
Sometimes, yes. Or they put it off until they feel ready, which, spoiler alert,
Yeah.
you never feel completely ready.
Yes, so true.
So Tiffany and others really emphasize that active speaking practice means truly participating, in engaging in conversations, expressing your own thoughts, sharing your opinions, formulating sentences in English in real time.
Not just repeating phrases from a book?
No, real communication. And it's not just about, making the right sounds or using the right words. Regular speaking practice, even if it feels really awkward or intimidating at first.
Which it often does.
Absolutely. But doing it anyway is crucial for building your confidence as a speaker.
Confidence again. That seems key.
It's massive. Several sources echo this, Tiffany, the English Fluency Handbook. The more you actively use the language to express yourself, the more comfortable, the more self-assured you'll naturally become.
It's like exercising a muscle you said earlier.
Exactly, the speaking muscle. The more you use it, the stronger and more reliable it gets. You trust it more.
And what was interesting was the advice about who to practice with. It wasn't just find a native speaker.
No, that was a really good point. Some resources specifically advised making an effort to practice speaking with a diverse range of speakers.
Including other learners.
Yes, absolutely. Tiffany highlighted how her online community, for example, has people from all over Brazil, Mexico, many other places.
So talking to other non-native speakers is beneficial. How?
Well, firstly, it gives you valuable speaking practice in what might feel like a less intimidating environment, right? You're both learning.
Yeah, maybe less pressure to be perfect.
Exactly. But also, it helps you get accustomed to a wider variety of English accents and speaking styles. People from different language backgrounds often have different pronunciation patterns.
So it prepares you for the real world, where not everyone sounds the same.
Precisely. It makes you a more flexible listener and communicator. Plus, it builds cultural awareness. And honestly, it can really help reduce that nervousness about speaking with native speakers later on.
How so?
Because you realize, hey, I can successfully communicate my ideas with people from completely different linguistic backgrounds using English. That's a huge confidence booster.
That's such a great point.
Yeah.
And it directly tackles that fear, doesn't it? The fear of making mistakes, of not being understood. That can be a huge barrier.
A massive barrier. It can paralyze people. Tiffany directly addresses this, encouraging listeners to actively push past that shyness, to deliberately seek out opportunities to speak, even if it feels uncomfortable.
Just got to do it.
Basically, yes. She emphasizes that the fear will naturally lessen over time with consistent practice, and especially as you accumulate more positive experiences actually communicating successfully in English.
Each successful chat builds a little more confidence.
Exactly. And the English Fluency Handbook, Had that really powerful visual, didn't it? The speaking tracker.
Oh yeah, the image showing the progress bar.
Yes, it showed a learner at 95% progress towards a goal, having spoken for 54 minutes with this message. Every minute speaking helps you become more fluent. Keep talking.
I love that. Every minute counts.
It really reinforces that simple but profound idea. Consistent effort, even just small chunks of dedicated speaking practice, makes a significant difference over time. Put in the minutes.
Okay, so we're actively listening to soak up the language, its sounds, its vocabulary.
Building the foundation.
And we're making a conscious effort to practice speaking regularly, building confidence, and getting used to producing the language.
Right, activating that knowledge.
Now, what actually fuels our ability to express ourselves during those speaking moments? What gives us the words we need?
Well, that would undoubtedly be vocabulary.
Makes sense.
And it's no surprise that technique number 3, according to teacher Tiffany and many others, is all about strategic vocabulary acquisition.
Yeah, okay. Not just random word learning.
Exactly. Building your vocabulary look, it's an ongoing process for any language learner, no matter your level. Honestly, even native speakers learn new words all the time.
True. I learned a new word just yesterday.
See. So Tiffany and the other resources really emphasize the importance of consistent and varied exposure to words.
Exposure through
actively engaging with English materials, reading books, articles, websites, listening to podcasts, music, conversations, watching movies and TV. Any way you can immerse yourself.
So maximizing input.
Maximizing meaningful input, yes. The more you encounter new words in different contexts, the more likely you are to understand them, remember them, and eventually use them yourself.
And again, it sounds like context is king here too, just like with listening.
Absolutely crucial. Learning words within the context of real conversations or authentic articles or engaging stories, it helps you understand not just the basic definition, but also how they're typically used, the other words they hang out with collocations, the subtle nuances of meaning.
So much richer than just a word and its definition on a flashcard.
Exactly. Tiffany reiterates that point about moving beyond just memorizing definitions from isolated lists. Really pay attention to how words are used naturally in the things you watch and listen to.
Okay, notice words in the wild.
Good way to put it. And this deeper understanding makes the vocabulary so much more useful and, crucially, more memorable.
But just encountering words isn't enough, right? You have to do something with them.
Exactly. Active practice is the other essential piece of the puzzle for solidifying new vocabulary.
What does it look like?
Well, both Tiffany and the English Fluency Handbook stress the importance of actively using any new words you learn. Try to incorporate them into your own speaking and writing.
Okay, put them into action.
Yes. It's really not enough to just passively understand a word when you see or hear it. You need to actively retrieve it and use it yourself to truly make it stick in your long-term memory and to feel comfortable using it fluently.
Make it part of your active vocabulary, not just passive.
Precisely. And the English Fluency Handbook introduced a very specific technique for the memorization part, spaced repetition.
Right, that sounded really interesting. How does spaced repetition actually work?
It's a very effective learning method backed by cognitive science that leverages how our memory naturally works, specifically how we forget things over time.
Yeah.
The basic idea is you review new information, in this case, vocabulary, at gradually increasing intervals.
That's not cramming it all at once.
Definitely not cramming. The handbook outlines a specific starting schedule. Learn a new list of words on day 1, then review that same list again on day 7, then review it again on day 16.
Okay, day 1, day 7, day 16, getting further apart.
Exactly. And after that, the gaps between your reviews of that specific list would increase further, maybe to around 2 weeks, then maybe a month, and so on.
Why does that spacing work so well?
Because it strategically prompts you to recall the information just as your brain is naturally starting to forget it. Each time you successfully recall it after a longer gap, the memory trace gets stronger.
So it interrupts the forgetting curve.
Precisely. It leads to much better long-term retention compared to just reviewing something 10 times in one day.
That makes a lot of sense. You're strengthening the pathway just before it fades.
Exactly. And the handbook also suggested going a bit deeper with the words beyond just the spaced repetition schedule. Things like visualization and paraphrasing.
How do those techniques help lock in vocabulary?
They're excellent supplementary strategies. Visualizing a word like creating a strong mental image or a little scene associated with its meaning.
Maybe even drawing a quick sketch.
Sure, or finding a relevant image online. That makes the word more concrete, less abstract, and therefore more memorable.
And paraphrasing.
Paraphrasing means trying to explain the meaning of the new word in your own words, even just explaining it to yourself silently.
How does that help?
It forces you to process the meaning more deeply, to connect it to concepts you already understand. It confirms you truly grasp the nuance, not just a dictionary definition. Trying to teach it to someone else is even better.
Okay, so making connections and processing deeply. Got it.
These active engagement techniques really boost understanding and retention.
All right, so we're actively listening, speaking regularly, strategically building our vocabulary, using things like spaced repetition and deeper processing. What else contributes significantly to that overall feeling of fluency? Immersion came up a lot.
Yes, immersion is incredibly powerful. It's essentially about creating an environment where you are just constantly surrounded by and interacting with English.
So living the language, not just studying it.
Exactly. The Fluent English Speaking Guide really emphasizes consuming as much English content as possible in your daily life, going way beyond your formal study time.
Like what kind of things?
Things like intentionally switching the music you listen to, maybe finding some English language artists you like, actively seeking out chances to interact with native speakers, if possible, maybe joining clubs or online groups.
Making English-speaking friends.
That's a great one if the opportunity arises. Also, watching English TV dramas, movies, YouTube channels, basically saturating your environment with the language as much as you realistically can.
And it's not just about the amount of content, is it? The sources mention something about engagement.
Absolutely crucial point. The guide highlights the importance of finding topics and types of content that you genuinely find interesting.
So follow your passions, but do it in English.
Exactly. If you love soccer, watch the matches with English commentary. If you enjoy cooking, find English language recipe blogs or videos. If you're into gaming, watch English-speaking streamers.
Why is that so important?
Because it makes the learning process enjoyable. And if it's enjoyable, you're far more likely to stick with it long term. It doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like pursuing your hobby. Motivation is key.
Makes sense. You'll naturally spend more time immersed if you actually like what you're doing.
Precisely. And the EF Jugo blog added a slightly more nuanced point about immersion, too.
Oh. What was that?
It was about potentially immersing yourself in specific English dialects, if that aligns with your goals.
Ah, okay. So if I want to work in the UK, maybe focus more on British English content.
Exactly. If that's your primary goal, then actively seeking out British films, TV shows, podcasts, and news can be particularly beneficial for tuning your ear to those specific accents, vocabulary choices, and cultural references. Same for American English, Australian English, etc.
Tailoring the immersion to the target environment. Smart.
It can definitely help you integrate more smoothly if you have a specific regional goal.
Now, okay, we're immersing ourselves, we're practicing speaking, we're learning vocabulary. Inevitably, as we put ourselves out there, mistakes are going to happen.
Guaranteed. It's a 100% certainty in language learning.
For everyone. Even advanced speakers make slips sometimes. But it seems like how we react to those mistakes, how we handle them, can make a huge difference to our progress and motivation.
You are absolutely right. It's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about what you do with them. Analyzing them, rather than just getting discouraged, is crucial for growth.
So don't just ignore them or feel bad.
No. The Fluent English Speaking Guide stresses going beyond just acknowledging an error. Actively try to figure out what specifically went wrong there. Was it a grammar rule I misunderstood, a word I used incorrectly, a pronunciation slip?
Why is that analysis helpful?
Because understanding the root of the mistake helps you learn from it and avoid repeating the exact same error in the future. It turns the mistake into a lesson.
The English Fluency Handbook echoed that too, right?
Yeah.
Something about taking responsibility.
Yes, it emphasized taking responsibility for your errors, especially maybe in more formal settings like a job interview, and framing them as learning opportunities. Showing self-awareness and a willingness to improve is actually a strength.
It really does sound like a fundamental shift in perspective is needed for many learners.
It is. Moving away from seeing mistakes as like evidence of failure or inadequacy, and instead recognizing them for what they truly are. Invaluable feedback. They're like little signposts pointing towards areas where you can improve, stepping stones, really.
And the handbook directly linked this to that concept of a growth mindset, didn't it?
Yes, exactly. That was a key connection. The handbook introduces this idea, which comes from the research of Professor Carol Dweck at Stanford.
Okay, so what is a growth mindset in a nutshell?
Basically, people with a growth mindset believe that their abilities, their intelligence, they aren't fixed. They believe they can be developed and improved through dedication, effort, and learning from challenges.
So effort matters. Challenges are good.
Yes. They tend to embrace challenges, see them as opportunities to learn and stretch themselves. When they hit obstacles or face setbacks, they don't see it as proof they're not good enough.
How do they see it?
They see it as essential feedback, information that helps them learn, adjust their strategy, and grow stronger. Failure isn't devastating, it's just part of the process.
And the opposite is the fixed mindset.
Right, where people tend to believe their abilities are largely innate and unchangeable, so they might avoid challenges because they're afraid of failing and proving they lack ability. They might give up easily when things get tough.
That makes sense. And the handbook even had that little quiz.
Yeah, a brief self-assessment to help you kind of reflect on your own tendencies. It asked about how you react to challenges, whether you believe you can change your own abilities, how you view effort versus talent.
And it put you on a spectrum.
Right. From a solidly fixed mindset at one end, through growth mindset with some fixed ideas, all the way to a strong growth mindset at the other.
And the key takeaway is you can change your mindset. It's not fixed either.
Absolutely. That's the most important part. Even if you recognize some fixed mindset tendencies in yourself right now, you can consciously cultivate a more growth-oriented approach.
Yeah.
A big part is consciously recognizing that making mistakes is not only okay, it's where a huge amount of learning actually happens. It's about actively choosing not to get discouraged or give up when things feel difficult.
Reframing the challenge.
Exactly. Reframing challenges as opportunities to stretch yourself, to get better, saying, I can't do this yet, instead of just, I can't do this.
That yet is powerful.
It really is. It implies possibility and growth.
Okay, so mindset is foundational. Now, the English Fluency Handbook then got into some very practical, hands-on speaking techniques we can use to actively push our fluency.
Yes, moving from mindset to method.
One was called the Repeat It 3 Times activity. Sounds simple. How does it work?
It is simple, but deceptively effective. It's designed specifically to help reduce hesitation and build smoother, more automatic speech patterns.
Okay, how do you do it?
You pick a question, maybe something you expect to hear in a real conversation or just a practice question. Then you answer that same question 3 times in a row.
3 times. What's the difference each time?
The first time, your main focus is just getting your ideas out. It's okay to pause, search for words, maybe even quickly check a note if you need to. Just formulate the answer.
Okay, focus on content first.
Right. The second time you answer the exact same question, your goal is to try and speak with a little more fluency, fewer pauses, fewer hesitations than the first time.
All right, improving the flow.
Exactly. Then, on the third repetition, your focus is entirely on speaking as smoothly and continuously as possible. Try not to pause significantly. Don't look things up. Just let it flow.
Oh, okay. So it's like progressively refining the delivery.
Precisely. This process of repetition, with that increasing emphasis on smooth delivery, helps build a kind of muscle memory for speaking more fluidly. It automates the phrasing.
Interesting. Another one mentioned was 432 speaking. That sounds intense.
It's definitely more challenging. It's designed to practice fluency under time pressure.
Okay, how does the 432 work?
You start by choosing a specific topic you want to talk about. Then you give yourself maybe 4 minutes just to quickly prepare, jot down some key ideas.
Preparation time, got it.
Then when the prep time is up, you speak about that topic for a full 4 minutes. Just talk continuously.
Okay, 4 minutes straight.
Then for the next round, you use the exact same topic. But this time you only have 3 minutes to speak, and you try to cover roughly the same amount of information.
Whoa, okay, so you have to speak faster or more concisely.
Exactly. It forces you to be more efficient, cut out unnecessary words, reduce pauses. Then, the final round, same topic again, but now you only have 2 minutes.
2 minutes? That's quick.
It really pushes you. This technique is fantastic for learning to condense your thoughts, prioritize your key message, and speak more fluently and concisely when you don't have unlimited time, which is often the case in real conversations.
I could see how that would build fluency under pressure. Great for presentations or interviews too, maybe.
Absolutely. Very practical skill. The handbook also really emphasized something else important for practice: creating a comfortable, safe space.
Why is that so important? What does a safe space mean here?
It's crucial, especially when you're still building confidence. It can be about the physical environment, finding a quiet place where you feel relaxed, where you won't be interrupted or feel judged while you experiment with the language.
Makes sense. Reduces self-consciousness.
Definitely. Alexa P., a tutor quoted in the handbook, mentioned starting with slow, clear speech and simple questions to create a calm, supportive vibe for anxious students.
So the tutor can help create that space too.
Absolutely. But it's also about creating a safe mental and emotional space for yourself.
How do you mean?
Consciously accepting that mistakes are okay, they're part of learning. Being kind to yourself when you stumble or don't get things perfect. Removing that internal pressure of having to be flawless every time you open your mouth.
Letting go of perfectionism. Easier said than done sometimes.
It is, but it's vital for freeing yourself up to actually practice and take risks.
And for finding practice partners. The handbook mentioned free online conversation classes, even hosting your own.
Yeah, that was a great proactive suggestion. There are platforms like Zoom, Discord servers, language learning forums, lots of places online connecting learners who just want to practice speaking.
So you can find others in the same boat.
Exactly. And taking the initiative to host a session, maybe pick a topic you're interested in, gives you even more control and tailors the practice to your needs.
English with Lucy on YouTube also mentioned finding free classes sometimes, right?
Yes, she suggested looking out for classes run by community groups, libraries, or sometimes even teachers offering free introductory sessions. Definitely worth exploring what's available both locally and online.
Okay, so lots of ways to find speaking practice. Now, thinking beyond specific practice sessions, how can we weave English learning more naturally into our everyday lives so it doesn't feel like separate study time?
That's a really important aspect for consistency and long-term progress. Several sources had great practical ideas for this.
Like what?
Integrating English learning into daily life, for instance, strongly suggested making small but consistent efforts to just bring English into your routine.
Simple things.
Yeah, really simple. Like labeling everyday items around your house, the fridge, the table, the window with sticky notes showing their English names. Constant little reminders.
Oh, I like that. Passive exposure throughout the day.
Exactly. Or changing the language settings on your phone, your computer, your social media apps to English. You're forced to navigate using English.
That's a brave step for some, but effective, I imagine.
It can be challenging at first, but it forces you to learn essential vocabulary very quickly. Another big one, highlighted in the Fluent English Speaking Guide, is the value of trying to think in English.
Think in English. How does that work?
Even just those small, fleeting internal thoughts you have all day long. What should I have for lunch? I need to remember to call Sarah later. Where did I put my keys? Try formulating those directly in English in your head.
Instead of thinking in your native language and then translating.
Exactly. It gets you more comfortable with constructing sentences spontaneously, accessing vocabulary directly in English without that constant mental translation step. It makes thinking in English more automatic over time.
That sounds like a powerful habit to build. The guide also mentioned something about building sentences daily.
Yes, using a dictionary app that sends a word of the day. The suggestion was to then consciously try to create, say, 3 original sentences using that new word.
Active construction again.
Right. A small, manageable daily task that reinforces vocabulary and practices sentence formation. And for deeper immersion, integrating English learning into daily life. Also mention cultural exchange programs.
Like study abroad.
Could be study abroad or shorter exchange programs, even volunteer opportunities in English-speaking environments. Really throwing yourself into the culture and language. A bigger commitment, obviously, but highly effective.
Definitely. Okay, we touched on goals earlier with the growth mindset, but the English Fluency Handbook went into more detail about setting realistic goals using the SMART framework.
Yes, SMART goals are crucial for making progress tangible and avoiding discouragement. SMART stands for
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Right, exactly. The handbook gave a great contrasting example. A vague goal like, I'll double my English abilities next month. What does that even mean? It's not specific, not measurable.
Probably not achievable either.
Right. Compare that to a SMART goal. I will learn 280 new vocabulary words relevant to my job over the next 2 months using the goal-list method for 20 minutes each weekday.
Okay. That's super clear. You know exactly what success looks like.
Precisely. It's specific. 280 job-related words. Measurable, 280 words, gold list method. Achievable, broken down daily, relevant to the job, and time-bound, 2 months. Much more effective.
And to track progress towards goals like that, the handbook mentioned using tech, like speech trackers.
Yes. Tools like the speaking tracker mentioned for Reply users can help you quantify how much you're actually speaking, which can be really motivating if your goal is, say, speak for 30 minutes every day.
Seeing the numbers go up.
Exactly. It provides objective feedback. The handbook also wisely stressed having a backup plan.
A backup plan for
when life inevitably gets in the way. You get sick, work gets crazy, something unexpected happens and disrupts your perfectly planned study schedule.
Ah, okay. What's the advice then? Don't just give up.
Exactly. Have some flexibility. Maybe instead of your usual hour-long study session, you just listen to an English podcast for 15 minutes during your commute that day, or watch a short YouTube video in English.
So do something, even if it's not the ideal plan.
Right. Maintain some contact with the language. Avoid that all-or-nothing thinking that can lead to long breaks and loss of momentum. Be kind to yourself. Stay flexible.
That's really practical advice. And finally, on goals and mindset, the handbook circled back to that crucial point about mistakes.
Yes, embracing them as part of growth. Consciously choosing not to let an error ruin your mood or shake your confidence.
Viewing them as feedback, as data.
Exactly. Seeing mistakes not as failures, but as clear signposts showing you exactly where you have an opportunity to learn and improve. That reframing is fundamental to a resilient, growth-oriented approach.
Okay, so beyond these core techniques and mindset shifts, there's obviously a huge world of technology and other resources out there that can help. Your sources mentioned quite a few.
Absolutely. Technology has really revolutionized language learning in many ways. The handbook mentioned classic tools still being useful, like flashcards.
Digital flashcards mostly now, I guess. Apps like Anki or Quizlet.
Yeah, lots of great apps for that, leveraging spaced repetition algorithms automatically, plus dedicated vocabulary builder apps and countless websites with interactive exercises, quizzes, reading materials. Teacher Tiffany also highlighted the value of these for systematic study.
And then there are the newer AI tools. That Reddit thread, Practical Tips, brought up ChatGPT.
Right, that's a fascinating development. The suggestion there was using it for things like generating example sentences or stories using specific vocabulary, or even for basic grammar checks.
So potentially helpful, but with caveats.
Exactly. It's important to be aware of the limitations. The step-by-step guide for advanced learners specifically cautioned against relying too heavily on AI, like ChatGPT, for nuanced feedback, especially on writing or speaking style.
Why is that?
Well, while it might catch some obvious grammatical errors, it might not grasp the subtleties of your intended meaning or the appropriateness of your tone, or give the kind of detailed, human-level insight that helps you really refine your communication. It lacks real-world communicative intuition.
So a potential tool in the toolbox, but not a replacement for human feedback or interaction.
That seems to be the consensus. Use it strategically, but don't outsource your learning entirely to it.
Makes sense. What about connecting with actual humans? Language exchange apps and online groups came up a lot?
Yes, consistently recommended across several sources, the Fluent English Speaking Guide, Master English, that Reddit thread.
What makes them so valuable for fluency?
They provide really invaluable, often free opportunities to practice speaking in a relaxed, informal setting. You can connect with native English speakers who are learning your language.
The classic tandem exchange.
Exactly, a mutually beneficial setup. Or you can connect with other English learners from all over the world just to chat and practice together.
Like those Discord servers the Reddit user mentioned.
Right. They said they had fun even though they were initially shy. It's often a lower pressure environment than a formal class, great for just getting mileage in speaking, building confidence, and hearing different accents and styles.
Podcasts were another resource mentioned frequently. English with Lucy, the Reddit tips. Why are podcasts so good for fluency?
They're fantastic for immersion because they're so accessible. You can listen while commuting, doing chores, exercising, integrating listening practice into your day easily.
Fits into dead time.
Exactly. And English with Lucy specifically recommended that powerful technique of listening while reading the transcript if available.
The dual input method.
Yes. Seeing the words while hearing them spoken correctly significantly boosts comprehension and helps solidify pronunciation and rhythm. She even mentioned that collaborative project where people donate to get transcripts made, which is cool.
That is cool. Community effort. Now for the more physical side of fluency, like moving your mouth faster.
Yeah.
Oxford Online English had some interesting ideas.
Yes, they talked about techniques like speed reading aloud.
Speed reading. Aloud. How does that help?
The idea is consciously trying to read an English text out loud faster than your normal comfortable pace. It trains the muscles involved in speech, your tongue, lips, jaw, to move more quickly and smoothly when forming English sounds and words.
Like physical training for your mouth.
Kind of, yeah. And they also suggested singing English songs.
Singing? Really?
Apparently so. Starting with slower songs and gradually moving to faster ones. It helps with pronunciation, rhythm, linking words together, and it's fun. They mentioned using it successfully for learning Chinese tones, too.
Interesting. Anything else from Oxford Online English?
They also touched on learning language in chunks.
Chunks? What does that mean?
Learning common phrases, collocations, sentence starters, multi-word units as single blocks, rather than focusing only on individual words and trying to piece them together with grammar rules every time.
Like learning by the way, or on the other hand, as one unit.
Exactly. Native speakers rely heavily on these chunks. Learning them helps you sound much more natural and speak more smoothly because you can retrieve these blocks automatically without having to construct them word by word.
Reduces processing load, speeds things up. Makes sense.
Definitely contributes to that feeling of effortless flow.
Okay, now let's shift gears slightly. For listeners who are maybe already at a pretty advanced level, what strategies can they use to really push their fluency further towards near native levels perhaps? The step-by-step guide had some ideas.
Yes, it offered some more sophisticated techniques for those already comfortable with general conversation. One key idea was actively synthesizing information.
Synthesizing, meaning?
Meaning engaging with multiple authentic native-level sources, all discussing the same complex topic, not just reading one article.
So read different news reports, listen to different podcast opinions, watch debates.
Exactly. Consume a variety of perspectives on the same issue. Then, the crucial step is to form your own well-reasoned opinion based on that synthesis. And be able to articulate that complex opinion clearly and fluently in English, maybe in a discussion or even in writing. It's akin to academic analysis, but applied to general topics.
Wow, that's definitely advanced. It requires high-level comprehension and production skills.
It does. The guide also stressed, even for advanced learners, the importance of continuing to move beyond ESL-specific materials.
Still immersing in native-level content.
Absolutely. Constantly challenging yourself with authentic resources across diverse topics to keep expanding vocabulary, encountering complex grammar, and deepening your understanding of cultural nuances and different viewpoints embedded in the language. Never stop pushing the boundaries of your comprehension.
And what about specialized language? Like for work?
That becomes increasingly important at advanced stages. The guide recommended actively identifying and learning the specific vocabulary, jargon, and terminology related to your personal interests or your professional field.
So if you're a doctor, learn medical English. If you're in finance, learn financial terms.
Precisely. Don't just rely on general English. Actively look up unfamiliar terms in your field. Use a thesaurus to understand synonyms and related concepts, maybe even ask native-speaking colleagues for clarification on precise usage and connotations.
Mastering the niche language.
Exactly. And finally, for truly advanced fluency, the guide suggested practicing different formats of communication.
Beyond just chatting.
Yes. Consciously working on delivering clear presentations, writing well-structured essays or reports, giving persuasive speeches, crafting nuanced and professional emails.
Adapting your communication style to the context.
Precisely. It requires mastering different registers, organizational structures, and vocabulary sets appropriate for each format. Being able to do that effectively across various contexts is a hallmark of advanced fluency. The guide also kept emphasizing critical thinking, forming well-supported opinions on complex issues.
Okay, that's a comprehensive set of advanced strategies. Now, throughout all of this, from beginner steps to advanced refinement, one resource kept popping up as potentially very helpful: a tutor or speaking partner.
Yes, the human element remains incredibly valuable. As Priply and others highlighted, a personal tutor offers several key advantages.
Such as?
Individualized guidance tailored to your specific needs and goals. Instant, targeted feedback on your errors and areas for improvement right when you make them. Help focusing on the vocabulary or grammar points most relevant to you.
Personalized learning.
Exactly. Plus, they can be a great source of motivation and accountability. Knowing you have that regular appointment can keep you on track.
The handbook also mentioned finding the right tutor, didn't it? Someone you click with.
Yes, finding a good match for your personality and learning style is important. And creating that comfortable, safe atmosphere during online classes so you feel encouraged to speak and take risks.
And even if a paid tutor isn't an option, The value of regular practice with friends or language exchange partners was consistently emphasized.
Absolutely. Multiple sources recommended this. It offers maybe a less formal but equally valuable way to build confidence, practice spontaneous conversation, improve listening, and just get those essential speaking hours in. Consistency is key.
So wrapping things up, Ben, as we've really dug into today, the journey to English fluency isn't just one single path, is it?
Not at all. It's really a multifaceted process, a dynamic combination of things we've talked about. Consistent active listening.
Building that foundation.
Making a real conscious effort to speak regularly even when it feels uncomfortable.
Building confidence and activating knowledge.
Strategically building your vocabulary in context.
Fueling your expression.
Learning from your mistakes, analyzing them, not fearing them.
Turning errors into lessons.
And absolutely crucially, cultivating that growth mindset. Believing you can improve and seeing challenges as opportunities.
Right. And what really stands out, I think, from everything we've discussed is that fluency.
Yeah.
It isn't just about knowing grammar rules inside out or having a dictionary's worth of vocabulary.
No, those are tools, but not the end goal.
Ultimately, it seems to be about developing the confidence to communicate, to share your thoughts, your ideas, your personality.
And to genuinely connect with other people through the English language. That's the real prize, isn't it?
It really is. And that brings us to a final thought, maybe a question for you, our listener, as you reflect on all this.
Yeah, something to take away and chew on.
Considering all these different techniques, strategies, and mindset shifts we've explored today, which ones really resonate most strongly with you, with your current learning style, your goals, your situation?
And perhaps more importantly, what is one small, concrete, actionable step you can commit to taking today or maybe this week to integrate one of these ideas into your regular English learning routine?
Absolutely. Don't try to do everything at once. Just pick one thing that feels right and start there. Because remember, just by tuning in today, by seeking out this knowledge, you've already taken a significant step forward on your journey.
That's right. You're actively engaging with your learning.
The key now is to take what you've heard, experiment a little, see what clicks for you, find what works best, and please be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself throughout the process.
It takes time. There will be ups and downs.
For sure. But every conversation you have, every podcast you listen to, every new word or phrase you learn and try to use, it's all meaningful progress. It's a step forward on your path to greater English fluency.
Every little bit counts.
It really does. So for today, we've really immersed ourselves in a whole bunch of different materials. We looked at transcripts from language learning channels, articles, even some academic research papers.
Right, a real mix.
Yeah, the goal was to sort of pull out the absolute best, most practical strategies for you to expand your English vocabulary.
And importantly, to do it in a way that feels, well, engaging, not just like you're staring at endless word lists. We want to avoid that feeling of being totally overwhelmed.
That's the key. Overwhelm is the enemy of learning, I think. We know you're listening because you want to get knowledgeable, fast, but also thoroughly. You appreciate those aha moments.
Yeah, those clicks. And you want to feel more confident, more informed in your English. So this deep dive is really tailored for that.
Our mission, as you like, is to extract those really important nuggets of knowledge, those actionable tips from everything we looked at, things you can actually use to boost your vocabulary in practical, maybe even fun ways.
Okay, fantastic. So where should we start? Let's maybe jump straight into some of those effective study techniques we found.
Sounds good. One thing that came up again and again from, well, several different sources was the idea of keeping a vocabulary journal or notebook.
Okay, like a dedicated place for new words?
Precisely. And it doesn't have to be, a fancy leather-bound book. It could easily be an app on your phone, whatever's convenient.
Makes sense. Just having a place.
Yes. The act of actively recording the word seems to be the first step in making it stick. Don't just hear it and hope you remember. Write it down.
And building on that, there was a really crucial point about not just writing the word in isolation.
Yes. Collocations. This is so important.
Explain that a bit more. Collocations are words that often go together.
Exactly. Think make mistake, not do a mistake, or heavy rain, not strong rain, or like the example you mentioned earlier, apply for a job, throw a party. These pairs just sound right to native speakers.
Because they're used together all the time.
Constantly. And learning them together means you're not just learning vocabulary, you're learning how the language actually works, its natural rhythm and structure. It helps you sound much more fluent.
So when you learn apply, you should also note down for a job, for a visa, apply sunscreen, maybe.
Perfect examples. You see the patterns.
Yeah.
You learn the word in its natural habitat, so to speak. It's much more effective than just learning apply on its own.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about the connections.
It really is. You're building a network in your brain, not just collecting isolated dots.
Okay, so journals, check. Collocations, check. What else came up as a strong technique? Learning through stories. This was another really popular recommendation.
Ah, I like the sound of that. Less like studying.
Kind of, because narratives provide context. You see the word used naturally in a situation. It's not just a definition on a page.
And you can see the nuances, maybe, like how the word feels in that context.
Exactly. Plus, you get grammar, sentence structure, everything all bundled together. And the suggestion was, don't be afraid to start simple. Children's books, graded readers.
Right, build up the confidence first.
Yeah, then move on to articles, short stories, novels, whatever interests you. And a great bonus now is audiobooks.
Oh, yeah, for pronunciation.
Definitely. Since English spelling is, let's be honest, a bit chaotic sometimes.
Understatement of the year.
Huh. Right. Hearing the word pronounced correctly while you read along is incredibly helpful. It connects the sound to the letters.
That combination sounds powerful. Seeing it and hearing it. It engages multiple senses, which we know aids memory. Plus, stories are often emotionally engaging, right? That emotion can act like a memory anchor for the new words you encounter within the story.
Interesting. So you remember the word because you remember the feeling of that part of the story.
Something like that, yeah. It makes the learning more experiential, less abstract.
Okay, stories. I'm sold on that one. Now, I remember seeing something about mapping. Vocabulary mapping.
Yes, vocabulary mapping. This is a more visual, structured approach. Quite interesting.
How does that work exactly? Is it like a mind map?
Pretty much. You start with a target word in the center. Let's say benefit.
Okay.
Then you branch out. You could add the definition, maybe in your own words. You could add synonyms, advantage, plus antonyms, disadvantage, drawback.
Ah, I see. Connecting related ideas.
Exactly. You could add the word family, beneficial, adjective, beneficiary now. You add collocations we just talked about, reap the benefits, mutual benefits.
Maybe an example sentence you create yourself.
Absolutely. And even some people find it helpful to add a little drawing or a visual cue if the word lends itself to that.
Wow, that sounds quite involved, but I can see how it would really force you to think about the word from all angles.
That's the whole point. It's active learning. You're not just passively reading a definition. You're constructing a network of meaning around the word. It mirrors how our brains link information.
More connections, easier recall.
Precisely. You're building multiple pathways to access that word in your memory. It promotes deeper processing.
Okay, that's a really solid technique for maybe those trickier, more important words you really want to nail down.
It could be, yeah. Or even for exploring a topic area. You could map out related vocabulary for, say, technology or cooking.
Right. Now, we can't talk about learning words without mentioning dictionaries.
Of course not. The essential tool. And the online ones now are just incredible resources. Some sources specifically mentioned Oxford and Macmillan.
What makes them so good, beyond just definitions?
Well, first, pronunciation. Usually you get both British and American English audio. That's huge.
Definitely. Hearing it is key.
Then, example sentences. Lots of them, showing the word in different contexts, different grammatical structures. That's vital for understanding usage.
Yeah, seeing it in the wild.
Exactly. Plus, they often show word forms, verb tenses, plurals, adjective-adverb forms. Some even highlight collocations or related idioms.
And some have apps, right? And maybe a word of the day feature.
Yeah, many do. The apps are super convenient for quick lookups on the go. And the word of the day, emails or notifications, can be a nice, gentle way to expose yourself to new vocabulary regularly without feeling overwhelmed. Just one new word a day.
It adds up over time.
It really does. Consistency again.
Okay, so good online dictionaries are a must-have. What about the old classic flashcards? Are they still relevant?
Apparently, yes. Both the traditional paper kind and, increasingly, the digital versions.
Like apps?
Yeah, apps and websites. Quizlet was mentioned as a popular one. The big advantage of digital flashcards is that they often incorporate images, audio pronunciation.
Right, making them more multisensory.
Exactly. And crucially, Many of them use spaced repetition algorithms. We should definitely talk more about spaced repetition later. It's a game changer for memory.
Okay, park that for later. But with these apps, you can make your own cards or use pre-made sets.
Both. You can create personalized decks for words you're learning from a book or class. Or you can find tons of pre-made sets for specific topics, irregular verbs, vocabulary for exams, even niche things like car parts or types of animals.
That sounds incredibly useful. Saves you some work if someone's already made a good set.
For sure. And the ability to practice on your phone or tablet anywhere, anytime is a huge plus for busy learners.
No more carrying stacks of paper cards around.
Exactly. Though some people still swear by the physical act of writing on paper cards. That kinesthetic aspect can help memory too.
True. It depends on your learning style, I guess.
Very much so. Experimentation is key.
Now, you mentioned consistency and not getting overwhelmed. There was advice about the quantity of words to learn at once, wasn't there?
Yes, one source recommended aiming for a smaller, manageable number each day. Maybe just 5 to 10 new words.
Only 5 to 10. That sounds achievable.
Right. The focus is on consistent effort, day after day, rather than trying to cram, say, 50 words in one sitting.
Because you probably won't remember most of those 50 anyway.
Exactly. Our brains are better at absorbing and retaining information in smaller chunks. Deep learning over shallow cramming. Quality over quantity.
That's reassuring, actually. It makes the task seem less daunting. Just 5 a day.
Over a year, that's still over 1,800 words.
Yeah.
It accumulates significantly.
Good point. And that ties back to the vocabulary notebook idea too, doesn't it? Recording those 5-10 words each day.
Absolutely. Writing them down, maybe with a definition and an example sentence you found or created, that active engagement helps solidify them.
The physical act of writing again.
Yep. Engaging that kinesthetic memory. It all adds up to create stronger memory traces.
Okay, so we've covered quite a few active study methods. Journals, collocations, stories, mapping, dictionaries, flashcards, small daily goals. That's a solid toolkit.
It is. But vocabulary learning isn't just about sitting down and actively studying lists or maps.
Right, there's the whole aspect of just absorbing language through exposure.
Precisely. Learning through context and, you could say, more passive or incidental exposure plays a huge role too. And often, it's more enjoyable.
Like learning with music, I saw that mentioned.
Yes. Music is fantastic. You get rhythm, repetition, natural language, idioms, cultural references.
And it's fun. How can you use it effectively, though, beyond just singing along?
Well, one suggestion was to actively listen to the lyrics. Maybe look them up. Try to understand the story or message.
Okay.
You could try translating lines or finding equivalent expressions in your own language. Some apps were even mentioned, like Letras or Sounter, that show lyrics, translations, and sometimes have interactive exercises tied to songs.
Oh, cool. So technology helps there, too.
Definitely. And memorizing lyrics is great practice. It drills sentence structures and vocabulary naturally. Specific songs were even suggested as good starting points. Things with clear lyrics, perhaps.
Like what? Just curious.
Things like Radio Gaga, Viva La Vida, Yellow Submarine were mentioned as examples. Recognizable tunes, often with storytelling elements.
Catchy tunes help with memory, too, I bet.
Absolutely. The melody acts as another hook for the words.
Okay, music. What else falls into this learning through exposure category?
Well, slightly more active, but still fun using things like crossword apps.
Crosswords for vocabulary.
Yeah, it's a bit like gamification. You have to recall words based on definitions or clues, often grouped by category. It tests your recall in a low-pressure way.
And makes you think about synonyms and related concepts.
Exactly. It reinforces the connections between words, plus it exposes you to vocabulary across different topics.
I can see that being quite addictive, actually. A fun way to spend a few minutes.
Much better than scrolling social media, perhaps.
Point taken. Now, there was a more pedagogical concept mentioned. Passive scaffolding. That sounds interesting.
Ah, right. That came from a literacy expert, talking mainly about teaching reading in classrooms. The idea is that a teacher doesn't necessarily pre-teach every single difficult word in a text.
Okay. So how do students learn them?
The teacher sets up the reading activity, maybe provides some background, but then lets the students engage with the text. The scaffolding, the support, comes responsively. The teacher observes, sees where students are struggling, and steps in with help or clarification as needed.
Ah, so it's support, but it's tailored to the moment of difficulty, not just given up front.
Exactly. Now, how does this apply to an independent learner?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Well, you can sort of become your own responsive scaffolder. When you're reading or listening and you hit an unknown word, Don't immediately run to the dictionary.
Try to figure it out first.
Yes. Use the
Sure.
context. Look at the surrounding words, the sentence structure, the overall topic. Make an educated guess. Engage that inference skill.
Like being a detective.
Kind of. It's a much more active way of reading. Then if you're still stuck, or if the word seems really important, then you look it up. But you've already engaged with it mentally.
That sounds like a really valuable skill to develop. Less reliance on the dictionary for every single word.
It is. And it strengthens your ability to handle authentic materials where you won't always know every word.
This ties directly into another major point, doesn't it? The sheer importance of context.
Oh, massively. One source called it a masterclass point. Encounter words in context. Don't just study isolated lists.
Why is context so powerful?
Think about it. A word on its own is just a label. In context, you see its meaning, yes, but also its grammar, its connotations, who uses it, when, why. It comes alive.
Like the examples given: conundrum, accolades, ostracize. You might guess the meaning from a sentence, even if you've never seen the word before.
Precisely. The surrounding text provides clues that help you understand and, crucially, remember the word, because it's anchored to a specific situation or idea. Isolated words lack those anchors.
So reading widely is key here. Encountering words repeatedly in different contexts.
Absolutely. Which leads to another related point. Focus on vocabulary that's relevant to you.
Relevant. How so?
Relevant to your interests, your job, your reasons for learning English. Don't just learn random lists of advanced words. Hunt for words you actually need and will use.
Be a vocabulary hunter.
Yes.
Like that.
If you love cooking, learn cooking vocabulary. If you work in IT, focus on tech terms. If you enjoy discussing politics, learn that specific language.
Because you're more likely to encounter those words again.
Yes, and you're more motivated to learn them because they matter to you. Plus, you'll have immediate opportunities to practice using them, which reinforces the learning.
Makes perfect sense. Learn what you need, learn what you love.
Couldn't have said it better. And one absolutely critical point. Whenever you encounter a new word, especially when you hunt down,
Let me guess.
pronunciation.
You got it. Always, always, always check the pronunciation. Use those online dictionaries, listen carefully, maybe even repeat it out loud. Because English spelling is designed to trick us.
It often feels that way. Relying on spelling alone is a recipe for mispronunciation, which can lead to misunderstandings and hinder your listening comprehension too. If you can't say it right, you might not recognize it when you hear it.
Solid advice. Never skip the pronunciation check.
Never.
Okay, so context, relevance, pronunciation. What about the sheer volume of reading? There was talk about extensive reading.
Yes, extensive reading. This is basically reading a lot, often for pleasure or general understanding, rather than intensive study. And the evidence suggests it's incredibly powerful for vocabulary acquisition.
How does it work? Just by seeing words often.
Pretty much. When you read extensively, you encounter a vast range of words, including less common ones, repeatedly in different meaningful contexts. Your brain starts to subconsciously absorb their meanings and usage patterns.
So it's less conscious effort, more absorption over time.
To a large extent, yes. It builds your vocabulary more gradually and naturally, almost like how native speakers acquire much of their vocabulary.
But what about unknown words when you're reading extensively? Do you stop and look them up or just keep going? There seem to be different opinions on that.
There were. Some people advocate for looking up almost every unknown word to maximize learning from that specific text, even if it slows you down.
The intensive approach.
Right. Others argue for prioritizing reading flow and enjoyment. Try to infer meaning from context and only look up words that appear many times or seem absolutely crucial to understanding the main point.
The more purely extensive approach.
Exactly. And probably the best path is a mix of both. Sometimes read intensively, dictionary ready. Other times just read for the pleasure of it, letting the context do most of the work. Adapt to your goals and the material.
Find your own balance.
Always.
I also saw a mention of something called the listening reading method. What's that about?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It involves listening to an audio recording of a text while simultaneously reading the same text.
Okay, like with audiobooks.
Similar. But the idea here is often to use material that might be slightly above your comfortable independent reading level.
Why would you do that? Wouldn't it be too hard?
The audio provides support. You hear the correct pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation, which helps you decode the written text. It's suggested as a way to quickly drill new words and structures by experiencing them through both eyes and ears at once.
Intensive exposure. Does it work?
Some learners swear by it for rapidly improving listening comprehension and vocabulary recognition, especially for bridging the gap to more complex materials. It might be quite demanding, though.
Worth trying, maybe. Another technique often discussed in learner communities is using monolingual dictionaries.
Yes, moving from bilingual English your language to monolingual English dictionaries.
Why is that considered a good step?
Because it forces you to think in English. You're understanding English words through other English words, building connections within the language itself, rather than constantly translating back and forth.
Like how a native speaker learns.
Essentially, yes. It helps you grasp nuances and connotations that might be lost in translation. It's definitely a step towards higher proficiency, though it can be challenging at first.
You need a certain base level of vocabulary to even understand the definitions, right?
True. It's a gradual transition. Maybe start by trying to understand the English definition first, and only use the bilingual dictionary as a backup if you're really stuck.
Good strategy. And this relates back to using context clues, doesn't it? Try to understand from context first.
Then try the monolingual dictionary.
And only translate as a last resort.
Ideally, yes. The more you can stay within English, the better.
Okay. What about sentence mining? That sounds intriguing.
Sentence mining. It's basically extracting example sentences that contain vocabulary or grammar points you want to learn.
So you find a good sentence in an article or book
that uses a word you just learned, or uses it in an interesting way, and you copy that sentence into your notebook or flashcard app.
Why the whole sentence? Why not just the word?
Because the sentence provides context. It shows the word's usage, its grammar, its common partners, collocations again. Studying the word within that natural sentence is much more effective for learning how to actually use it, not just recognize it.
So it's context-based study material you create yourself.
Exactly. You're collecting real-world examples of how the language works. Many people use sentence mining with spaced repetition software for powerful results.
I can see how that would work well together. Okay, and a really important reminder that came up was that advanced vocabulary isn't just about knowing big, fancy words.
Oh, absolutely not. That's a common misconception. A huge part of advanced vocabulary is mastering common expressions, phrasal verbs, idioms, and collocations, the everyday building blocks of natural speech.
Stuff like get along with, run out of, make up your mind.
Precisely. Those phrases are essential for fluency, but they often don't follow simple dictionary definitions. You need to learn them as chunks, often through exposure to authentic media conversations, movies, podcasts.
So, consuming real English content is vital for picking these up.
Indispensable. You absorb the natural flow and the common pairings of words that make up fluent communication.
There is also an interesting finding about prior knowledge helping vocabulary learning.
Yes. One study suggested that if you already know something about the topic you're reading or listening about, it actually makes learning new vocabulary within that topic easier, especially for review and consolidation.
So if I'm learning about, say, climate change, reading an article about it might be easier if I already have some background knowledge.
Exactly. That background knowledge provides a mental framework, a scaffold, onto which you can more easily attach the new vocabulary related to that topic. The new words have somewhere to stick.
That makes sense. Leverage what you already know.
Right. It can make tackling new topics less intimidating if you start with areas you have some familiarity with.
Now, thinking about learners' experiences, some research highlighted common challenges they face. What were those?
Well, several key things. First, simply acquiring the correct meaning of a word, including its nuances and connotations. Second, mastering the spelling and grammar associated with the word, how it changes form, what prepositions it takes.
Okay, meaning, spelling, grammar. What else?
Pronunciation, as we've said, is a big hurdle, often because of interference from the learner's first language. Getting the sounds and stress patterns right takes practice. And perhaps the biggest challenge mentioned was moving from passive knowledge, recognizing a word when you see or hear it, to active use, being able to confidently use the word yourself in speaking and writing.
That gap between recognition and production, that feels very real.
It's a significant leap. It requires not just understanding, but internalizing the word well enough to retrieve it and use it appropriately and accurately under the pressure of real-time communication.
So knowing the word isn't enough. You have to be able to use it.
That's the ultimate goal for most learners, isn't it? Effective communication.
Definitely. Okay, that covers the challenges. How do we make sure the words we learn actually stay learned? Let's talk about memory and retention strategies.
Right, crucial topic. And the star player here, based on cognitive science, is spaced repetition.
We mentioned this briefly with flashcard apps. Can you unpack it a bit more?
Sure. Spaced repetition is basically a technique for scheduling reviews of learned material at increasing intervals.
Increasing intervals, so you review less often over time.
Exactly. You might review a new word, say 10 minutes after learning it, then an hour later, then a day later, then 3 days later, then a week, then 2 weeks, and so on. The intervals get longer as long as you remember the word correctly.
Why does that work better than just reviewing it randomly?
It combats the forgetting curve. We naturally forget things over time. Spaced repetition prompts you to recall the information just before you're likely to forget it. Each successful recall strengthens the memory trace, making it last longer.
So it interrupts the forgetting process at the optimal moment.
Precisely. It's far more efficient than cramming, where you might learn quickly but forget just as fast, or massed practice, reviewing loads all at once, which is less effective for long-term retention.
Makes sense. And there were different ways to implement this, like a box method.
Yeah, the Lightner box system is a common low-tech method using physical flashcards. You have several boxes, maybe 5. New cards start in box 1. If you get it right, it moves to box 2. Get it right from box 2, it moves to box 3, and so on.
And if you get it wrong...
It goes all the way back to box 1.
Ouch. Strict.
It is. But the idea is that cards in higher boxes are reviewed less frequently. e.g. box 1 daily, box 2 every 3 days, box 3 weekly, etc. It forces you to focus on the stuff you don't know well.
A manual spaced repetition system.
Exactly. But as we said, software makes this much easier.
The apps like Anki or Memorank.
Yes. They handle all the scheduling automatically based on algorithms. You just open the app, and it tells you which cards are due for review today. It tracks your performance and adjusts the intervals for each card individually.
That sounds much less fiddly than moving cards between boxes.
It is. Plus, digital decks can include audio, images, example sentences easily. They're incredibly powerful tools for efficient vocabulary memorization.
So, spaced repetition, either low-tech or high-tech, is a key strategy for making words stick.
Definitely one of the most evidence-based methods for long-term retention.
What other memory principles are important? We talked about learning words by associating them with known words.
Yes, building connections.
Yeah.
Our memory works by association. When you learn a new word, consciously try to link it to things you already know.
How? Like finding synonyms.
Synonyms, antonyms, words from the same category, like types of fruit, personal experiences related to the word, mental images. The more links you create, the more mental hooks you have to retrieve the word later.
So don't learn it in a vacuum. Connect it to your existing knowledge web.
Exactly. Make it part of the network.
And another point was about engaging multiple senses.
Right. Don't just read the word, see it, hear it, pronunciation, say it out loud yourself, write it down. Kinesthetic memory.
Maybe visualize it. Draw it.
If possible, yes. The more sensory channels you involve in the encoding process, the richer and stronger the memory trace will be. Think, see it, say it, hear it, write it. Maybe even act it out if it's an action verb.
Okay. Maybe not in public, but the principle is clear. Multisensory learning equals stronger memory.
That's the idea.
And finally, related to memory, was the idea that learning relevant words improves retention.
Yes, it circles back to motivation and usage. If a word is relevant to your life and interests, you're more motivated to learn it properly.
And you're more likely to encounter it and use it again soon.
Exactly. And every time you successfully retrieve and use that word in a real situation, you are actively reinforcing the memory, making it stronger and less likely to be forgotten. Relevance boosts both initial learning and long-term retention.
So choose your vocabulary targets wisely. Focus on what matters to you.
It makes the whole process more efficient and rewarding.
Okay, fantastic. We've covered study techniques, learning through exposure, and memory strategies. Let's talk now about the practical application and, importantly, the mindset needed for this journey.
Absolutely. Because knowing words is one thing, but using them confidently and having the right attitude is another huge part of the equation.
One source mentioned that common feeling learners have of sounding repetitive, using words like thing or good or nice all the time.
Yes, that feeling of having a limited toolkit, Learning more specific vocabulary, different adjectives, more precise nouns and verbs is the direct antidote to that.
So instead of good, you could say excellent, beneficial, suitable, delicious, depending on the context.
Exactly. It allows you to express yourself with much more precision and nuance. And that, in turn, boosts your confidence because you feel you're communicating your intended meaning more effectively.
Less frustration, more clarity.
Definitely. It's about moving beyond basic survival language to more sophisticated expression.
And related to that is the challenge of understanding native speakers when they use idioms or non-literal language.
Right. Those expressions that don't mean what the individual words suggest. Break a leg, bite the bullet, the elephant in the room.
They can be really confusing if you haven't encountered them before.
They rely heavily on cultural context and shared understanding. Learning them often comes from, again, lots of exposure to authentic language and maybe some specific study of common idioms. It's a layer beyond individual word meanings.
But the good news was that achieving a really high native-like level of vocabulary is possible, right?
Yes, absolutely. It takes time, dedication, and the right strategies, but it's an attainable goal. Don't assume there's some magic ceiling you can't break through.
That's encouraging, but it requires ongoing effort. It's not a one-time task.
No, language learning, especially vocabulary, is a continuous process. Even native speakers learn new words throughout their lives. It requires consistent effort and practice. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Consistency, again, that word keeps coming up.
Because it's fundamental. Little and often is the key.
And alongside the effort, maintaining the right mindset is crucial, like enjoying the process.
Yes. Trying to find joy in discovering new words, in understanding nuances, in being able to express yourself better. If it feels like a total chore, it's much harder to sustain the effort.
And being confident, even with the vocabulary you do have now, not waiting until you're perfect to speak.
Absolutely vital. Don't let the fear of making mistakes paralyze you. Use the English you have today. Communication is the goal, not perfection. Every conversation is practice. Confidence grows with use.
That's great advice. Use it or lose it and gain confidence by using it.
Pretty much.
Interestingly, going back to methods, one study found that simply reading books, newspapers, blogs was reported by many learners as a really successful way they learned vocabulary.
Yeah, that reinforces the power of extensive reading we discussed. It's accessible, often enjoyable, and highly effective for incidental vocabulary acquisition. It seems to be a go-to strategy for many successful learners.
Just immersing yourself in the written word.
It pays dividends over time.
But then there's that challenge we mentioned. Using the new words actively. Reading helps you recognize them, but how do you get them into your speaking and writing?
That's the crucial bridge to cross. Some research emphasizes the need for active use. It's not enough to just see or hear the word. You need to try producing it yourself.
How can learners practice that?
Well, consciously try to incorporate new words into your conversations, even if it feels a bit forced at first. When writing emails, essays, or even journal entries, make an effort to use the more precise vocabulary you've learned instead of falling back on simpler words.
Maybe set a goal, like using 3 new words in a conversation today.
That could work. Or review your writing specifically looking for places where you could upgrade the vocabulary. It requires deliberate effort to push past passive recognition into active production. Practice is key.
It won't happen automatically just by reading.
Not usually, no. Active use solidifies the learning and makes the word truly part of your usable vocabulary.
And one final, really important point. What works for one person might not work for another, right?
Absolutely. Critical reminder. We've discussed loads of strategies today. Journals, maps, flashcards, music, reading, spaced repetition. But not every technique will click with every learner.
So people need to experiment.
Yes. Try different methods. See what you enjoy, what feels effective, what fits your learning style and your life. Maybe you hate flashcards but love learning from podcasts. Maybe you find mapping tedious but thrive on reading novels.
Be your own learning detective.
Exactly. Pay attention to what works for you. Reflect on your progress. Be willing to adjust your approach. There's no single best way, only the best way for you.
That's a perfect note to start wrapping up on. Okay, so to quickly summarize the key takeaways from this deep dive.
We saw the importance of active study. Things like keeping that vocabulary journal, focusing on collocations, using stories, maybe trying vocabulary maps, and using flashcards, especially with spaced repetition. And learning consistently, even just a few words a day.
Right. And then the huge value of learning through context and exposure, lots of reading, listening to music perhaps, really using those context clues before reaching for the dictionary, and crucially, Focusing on words relevant to your life and always checking pronunciation.
Then we hit memory strategies, really understanding and using spaced repetition is probably the biggest one there, but also linking new words to old ones and engaging multiple senses, seeing, hearing, saying, writing.
And finally, the practical side. Using precise vocabulary to boost confidence, tackling idioms, remembering it's a long game requiring consistency, enjoying the journey, and maybe most importantly, experimenting to find your best strategies. Active use is key to bridging that recognition production gap.
That covers the main points, I think. It's a multifaceted approach, isn't it? No single magic bullet.
Definitely not. It's about building a set of habits and using a range of tools consistently. So we really hope if you're listening that you'll take some of these ideas and just try them out.
Yeah, experiment. See what resonates.
Yeah.
See what helps you feel more confident and capable in English.
And maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Think about how expanding your vocabulary isn't just about passing a test or ordering coffee.
Good point. It's bigger than that.
It really opens doors, doesn't it, to understanding different cultures, different ways of thinking expressed through language, accessing information, connecting with people on a deeper level.
Absolutely. More words mean more tools to understand and engage with the richness and complexity of the world. It's an incredibly rewarding aspect of language learning.
So keep exploring, keep learning, keep hunting for those words.
Well said.
Thank you all so much for sticking with us through this really detailed deep dive. We hope you found it genuinely useful.
Yes, hopefully you've got some concrete ideas and strategies you can put into practice right away. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.